Welcome to the State of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dido and I'm joined by someone who I just met very recently, but I cannot wait to talk to some more because our first conversation just, I think, 2 weeks ago or last week went forever on so many topics that we both care about. And I cannot wait for those who are listening to get introduced to her. But first thing first, Alexandra, thank you so much for saying yes and coming to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me, Dido. I'm excited for a continuation of our good conversation from the other week.
Okay, so let's jump into it. So those who know any work that I do know it always has to do with emotional regulation and feeling as settled emotionally as possible to live the best life you can live. So the idea of living life from a state of kindness means that you live life from a state where you learn how to notice your emotions as they come, accept them as they come without judgment, hold space for them, and then use all of that to regulate your nervous system. And the goal there is if you can live from a state that is a lot more settled, a lot more regulated emotionally, then you get to be kind to yourself first, because you are the most important person in your own life. And after being kind to yourself, then you can be kind to other people and to the world. So that's the goal that we have here. And we love sharing practical tools for everybody to access that emotional regulation. And the whole purpose of emotional regulation is to learn how to dance with stress. And I use that word dance intentionally because stress is not something you can get rid of. You will always have some stress in your life. Some stress actually, I can argue, is useful. It's just a matter of discerning what kind of stress is useful, why is it useful, and then also how to manage the stress that is not so useful and leads to the kind of life that we don't want to live. And you happen to be an expert on stress, and it's an interesting topic to be an expert in. And so I want to start by asking a little bit first, why do you care about this topic? Of all things that you could have done, you're so driven, accomplished, and motivated. You could have done anything, and yet you chose to spend so much time, dedicate your life to helping folks deal with stress and manage it. Like, how come?
Yes, that's a good question. It's always fun to start with kind of where did the origin of my interest come from? I would say there was a couple threads of my interests. And I'll start by saying that in the 7th grade, there was a science fair, and the project that I did was about whether we really could feel or sense somebody else's energy without any physical touch. So what I did is I had a piece of cardboard that I would put in front of my research participants, and I would have them put their hands through 2 holes that were cut out, and I would hold my hands over their hands. And I would do 10 different repetitions, and I would have the participants say whether they could feel or sense my energy when my hands were placed over them. So I've always had this super inner or internal drive to understand whether there was more mystery out in the world than was true to the eye. And that initial project had come because my mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and she had gone to a healer, and the healer was performing healing touch on her, which is a form of a therapy or a treatment where the practitioner doesn't touch a person's body, but instead moves the energy around the body's energy field. And I really was curious, like, is that real? Is that a thing? Is that just fake? And so even starting in the 7th grade, I was interested in these questions of mystery, of energy, of how does the body work? How does the mind work? How does spirituality work?
Wow. Okay, so there's so much in there, but I have to ask the question. So what did you figure out? Does it work? Is it possible?
So in that science experiment, which, by the way, I won the county science fair for, we found out that,
Whoa.
yeah, and I can still remember the results. The results were 50-50. I don't think I ran any statistical analyses, but I remember half of the time that they could tell whether I was there or not, and the other half, they were wrong. And so in my mind, it left me feeling like, I don't know. I really don't know the answer. It wasn't clear whether somebody could sense me or not sense me. And so I left even with more kind of interest and curiosity about the mind body connection and the mysteries of the world.
Wow, what a cool origin story. So you were already kind of interested in science then, because not only did you have a question, but you actually planned out a way to try to test it, which is not very different, except just significantly more evolved than
Right.
what you've done in your adult
Yes,
life. That's really cool.
exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome. So let's get into this idea of stress then. So I made a claim, right? I said that stress is something you can't get rid of. I made the claim that, in fact, stress can be useful. And I know that when people hear the word stress, and the folks listening to this are parents, educators, mentors, like people who care about the future of the youth, right? Some folks will be young, but mostly it's adults who take care of youth, who listen. And when they hear the word stress, typically, of course, it tends to be a very negative thing. So, first, just check me on that. Is it true that stress is something we cannot get rid of? And is it also true that stress can be useful or helpful?
And I agree with you that stress really can't be avoided. It really is just a part of being human. And stress happens to all of us. Interestingly, from the science of stress, really looking at stress or stressful events. So you can measure stress in a variety of ways, but one of the ways that you measure stress is by asking somebody how many stressful events have occurred in their life, like being in a car accident, getting divorced, having a parent that was incarcerated, dealing with addiction, like major events that are stressful. And what we see is that while everybody experiences some form of stress, stressful events are not evenly distributed across the world or the country. Some people experience a greater number of stressful events than others. And you can imagine that that happens in, let's say, places that have to deal with poverty or food insecurity or war torn countries. There are places where more stressful life events happen. But everybody experiences the very human experience of feeling stressed or feeling that tension and anxiety and overwhelm that comes from just being a human and trying to navigate the world.
Mm. And as we do that, we've all heard the recommendations, right? It's such an interesting concept for me to think about the difference between knowing something and then taking action towards doing something about it successfully. So it's like if you ask anybody who's stressed right now, what are the three things that you would recommend that somebody who's stressed does? They could come up with a good list. And yet it doesn't mean that they aren't stressed themselves. And I always wonder about why that is. But within that, I know that there are so many tools I've heard about, right? The importance of making sure that you eat properly, making sure that you sleep enough, making sure that you have social interactions with people, making sure that you connect with nature. So can you confirm some of these tools that are accessible to anyone? Because the goal here, once again, is anybody listening, you don't need to become an expert in emotional regulation in order to access some of these tools. You don't have to be a guru who has taken classes and led workshops. Like you can access these tools as long as you are a human being or introduced to them and give it a shot. So is it fair to say that there are lists of things that anybody can access and start today that can help with stress, Alexandra?
Yes, definitely. And I think yeah, I'm glad that you began your statement there with sleep and food. And that's because when you're in a state of really high stress or chronic stress. So chronic stress is what's experienced when you have too much stress for too long. So one of the ways in research that we study chronic stress is in the instances of caregiving, where you're caregiving for somebody that is sick or dealing with some sort of mental or physical disability that they need daily assistance with. So in my research lab at UCSF, one of the models of this were to look at caregivers of family members who have Alzheimer's disease. So imagine that you're caregiving for, let's say, your father who has Alzheimer's disease and you're the primary caregiver. I would study that caregiver. I remember in this one study, I was interviewing a caregiver and I said, well, how many hours a day are you caregiving for your father? And she said, well, 24/7. And I said, oh, well, there's, we have to subtract like the hours you're sleeping, for example, like, it can't be all day. And she said, no, it's 24/7 because even when I'm asleep, I can't be fully asleep. My father will get up and wander and he'll leave the house and go into the street. So I always have to be partially awake so that I can hear if he gets up or has any needs in the night because I need to keep him safe. And that really impacted the way I think about stress. Because what I realized is some people are living in these circumstances in which the stress is never turned off. Their bodies have to be dealing with whatever that stressful thing is every day, all day long. And what does that really mean on the body? To never be able to really deeply rest. And so, if you're finding yourself in that kind of chronically stressful situation, what you want to be focused on are the fundamentals of caring for your body. And the fundamentals are movement, any kind of movement, walking, push-ups, some yoga stretches, just moving your body to get your blood and oxygen circulating. Eating regularly and nutritiously, so whole foods, avoiding processed foods that are very inflammatory, or other things that are high in sugar, high in fat. And then the third is sleep and finding ways to really prioritize getting good quality sleep. Those three things are the foundation of how you're going to care for your physical body when you're going through stressful times. Then you can build on that with other practices that I think, you teach a lot around emotion regulation and contemplative practices. But I think for somebody who's feeling like right now, I'm just under so much stress, I don't know what to do. The answer is often to go back to those basics and start there.
Yeah, I love that because once again, the goal is to let everyone know that you have access to these tools and these are the basics, right? So, and I love that you said movement and not exercise. And the reason why I like that word movement is that in my own work and journey, I've seen how the word exercise has baggage and can make people feel excluded or as if they don't belong to the group of people who are supposed to be people who exercise. And yet it's all about movement, walking, stretching, something as simple as if you spend multiple hours on the computer sitting down, standing up and taking one call standing, like just something as simple as that is really, really important. So you explain it's about moving the blood and the oxygen and then eating regularly and then nutritious food and also sleep. Now, if somebody right now is saying, well, actually, I drink a lot of coffee, I thrive on not sleeping as much, and in my industry, in fact, we brag about not sleeping because I've seen this. I've seen people who are actually proud of the fact that they only sleep. Oh, how many hours did you get last night? I only got 3 or 4. Like, what would you say to somebody like that who finds themselves in a culture of hustle and actually feels like there's a badge of honor that comes with not sleeping just so you can perform better?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think what I would encourage is that it really, at the end of the day, it's really about you as an individual. Everybody's body is so different in terms of how they operate and what makes them feel their best. So if performance, like showing up consistently every day in a state of mental clarity and physical energy, if that's the ultimate goal, then I don't really care how many hours of sleep you're getting, as long as you're getting the number of hours of sleep that you need to feel that way. And so that is why I do think that the Aura Ring or some of these wearables around sleep can be helpful, because you're learning about yourself, your own individual needs, and what it takes for you to show up as your best self.
Yes. So this is an experiment that begins with within, right? So same point I made earlier about the state of kindness, starting with kindness towards yourself. Kindness towards yourself means getting to understand how you work, how your body works, and knowing that that's you, right? Everybody
Mhm.
doesn't work the same way. But I think I would challenge somebody who is in that kind of kind of mode of not sleeping much and showing up to hustle to just take an inventory of how they actually feel after not sleeping much and just compare, right?
Mhm.
Because again, the journey is yours. You get to figure out what works for you. So maybe take some time and figure out, how do I feel? Like, for example, right, I have exercised consistently for many many years early in the morning. I For 5 to 6, maybe even 7 years, I would work out at 5 a.m. Then I did 6 a.m. And so for me, when for the first time someone told me, a fitness coach told me that I need to eat before exercising, it didn't make any sense to me. I said, first of all, I'm up at 4:30. When am I going to eat? And it's just weird. I need to get up, get ready, and go to the gym. And I argued about this for a really, really long time until I met a coach who just gonna give me a better way to understand this. And so she said, look, your body does what you train your body to do. I am not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying give this a chance, because I argue that if you start to eat an hour before you exercise, just it's something, a little small something, you will actually perform better at the gym. Now, I trusted her, so I chose to give it a shot. But before, I didn't think it would make any sense, because I've been training for years without doing that. And guess what? After two weeks of eating like a banana or an apple before working out, I can totally see the difference.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
and not only am I seeing a difference in how I'm performing, but now I wake up craving something to eat, right? The point being that you can train your body. Your body does what you train it to do. I had trained my
Yeah.
body to exercise in the morning without eating, and so I assumed that was the best thing it could do or should do or wanted. But after being open-minded and trying something new, I can see how I'm performing better, and now my body actually craves um, a snack before working out. So that's just interesting. So I just wanted to share with
Yeah,
the
that
ones
is
who are listening.
interesting, and I also think there's a balance there, right? Like you can train your body, absolutely, and that's one of the amazing things about the body and the brain as well. With all the new research on neuroplasticity, we can change our thought patterns and the way our brains operate. And then, I feel a need to balance that with some of the realities of living in a human body. I do a lot of work now with high achieving moms. So, like corporate female leaders that have young kids. And one of the realities of having young kids, especially babies, is that you're up a lot in the night. And so there's a greater need to honor the reality that you're getting very disrupted sleep. And interestingly, some of the science has shown that one of the best ways to actually recover is to get what's called anchor sleep, which is like a 4 hour chunk of sleep. And that this, if you can get anchor sleep, that this is a good predictor of not developing postpartum depression. Meaning, the women who aren't getting
Mm,
a 4 hour chunk are more likely to get or develop postpartum depression. Anchor sleep is more commonly accessed in the very early morning. So, like a window of time from 4 to 8 a.m. The body and brain have an easier time having that chunk of time in that early morning. High achieving women can get into a mentality that they are failures because they're not getting to the 6 a.m. workout class like maybe they
mm,
used to, or like they're seeing on LinkedIn that everybody's up at 5 a.m. and you have to get up before your kids. And what I'm really pushing it against is that narrative that no, there are times when you have to honor the physical needs of your own body, which is, you're not
mhm.
sleeping through the night. Whether you go, maybe you can go to bed earlier, but you're still waking up to be with the baby or breastfeed or whatever the needs are. And so, really honoring, no, actually, for this stage of your life, that early morning time is the best thing you could do for yourself physically and mentally is to get that sleep and not put that pressure on yourself to be at a spin class at 6 a.m. And you don't want to train your body out of that, right? You actually want to train your body to be in
Yeah.
alignment with the biological processes of healing and mental health that come from
Mm.
that sleep. So I think there's a nuance here around these topics.
I love that. Thank you for that nuance about the balance, right? Because once again, it goes back to what you said earlier, which is getting to understand your body, yourself, and with what I said earlier, which is holding space without any judgment, right? So if you used to be able to do something and now you can't anymore and feel sad about it, lean into what's going on without judging yourself for being a
Mhm,
failure.
mhm.
And I had never heard of this idea, this concept of anchor sleep. Thank you. That I have a lot of digging to do because I that's a different conversation, but I love that. Anchor sleep, 4 hours. Okay, cool. So that's really good. So keeping with the theme of the balance and the reality of real life. Look, everyone has heard at some point that there are things you can do to manage stress. Meditate, do yoga, take long walks, spend time in nature, and people who have the time and the means to do this regularly and go to a retreat, like I know people who go to a silent retreat or to a nature retreat, like all those things are great. But for the regular average person who says, look, I don't have the time or the means to do that, to go to the retreat, to sign up for a for a yoga class. I don't have the time. What are some simple things, perhaps easier to access for the average person, that they can use to manage their stress?
Think I have an answer that I don't know if you've heard before, and so I'm excited to share it with you. I will say my answer is sensory pleasures. What I mean by this
Mm.
is that we can use our sensory system to find ways to make ourselves feel better in the moment. And there's science behind this that I'll share with you. But if you think of what you learned back in elementary school, there's 5 senses. There's taste, touch, sight, smell, sound. I almost forgot the fifth. And those are the ways that our body experiences the current moment through hearing something, through seeing something, tasting something, smelling something. And one of the biggest, most profound insights that I've learned in the past few years around stress science is that the sensory system is actually the fastest way to shut down the body's stress response. That's because the body is constantly trying to pick up on cues of threat and safety. And this just happens unconsciously. I'm looking at facial expressions. I'm sensing what's happening with the weather outside. I'm feeling, am I hot or cold? Is there somebody in my environment that's kind of scaring me? Do I feel safe? Constantly, our body is unconsciously picking up on the cues of threat and safety. The primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system is really what's responsible for picking up on those unconscious cues. And that's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve runs from the back of the brainstem, all the way through the spinal cord to nearly every organ in the body. And it's picking up on any external information. It's also picking up on all of the sensory information that's coming into us. And 80% of the nerve fibers of the vagus nerve communicate from the body to the brain. And only 20% communicate from the brain to the body. And why that's so radical is because that means when our nerve is trying to sense, am I under threat or am I under safety? It's not going up here to learn, oh, do I think I am safe? Do I think I am scared? It's just feeling. It's just sensing. It's just sending information through those nerve fibers, the 80% that go upward from the body up to the brain, and telling the brain, right now you're safe or right now you're under threat. And so when we're feeling stressed and we know there's not a real threat, there's not a lion about to attack us. It's actually just a bunch of emails that I feel overwhelmed by. So I know that it's It's stress, but it's not threat. What we can do to help our bodies calm down is make our bodies feel safe and feel good. And we can do that by giving ourselves sensory cues that teach us that we're safe. Like right now, I'm wearing this really cozy sweater. It was a little cold in my house. So I put on this really cozy, comfortable sweater. This is a perfect sensory cue of safety. I'm warm. It feels really soft. I like it. I feel good in it. And it is a sensory signal to my body that right now, in this moment, all is good. I am safe. There's other sensory cues you can do, like essential oils, music, cooking, sensory cues that allow yourself in the moment to know that you're safe. There's no need to be in that threat or stress response. What do you think
All
about that,
right,
Dido?
let's go into it. I love it. I love that. I have a lot to say about that. I love that. I love everything about that. Okay, cool. So here's what's coming up for me, right? So, like Alexander just said, one of the key things is to have a fundamental understanding of the difference between a perceived threat and a real threat. This is important, right? If you often find yourself having a stress response when things are happening, such as getting a work email on a Saturday, or posting something on social media and somebody has a negative comment to make, or you have an interview. Like, it is normal to feel stressed because of those things, but sometimes your nervous system makes it feel as if that threat was the same thing as a lion wanting to eat you. And it's
Right.
not quite the same thing, right? So that distinction is crucial, first of all, because once you know that there's a distinction, then you can look into the tools to use to get access to the knowledge that lets you know which one is it, right? Okay, this is really important. After that, then, how do you do it? I love the idea of the senses, and I tell you why. Because what I'm pushing is a concept of emotional regulation that human beings, by the virtue of being human beings, have access to. So before you
Mhm.
can reach out to the app on your phone, before you can go out there and talk to anyone, what do you have? You have your breath, you have the sense of the sight, touch, smell, and everything. So I love, 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 love that. And here's how I think about that typically. I think about the idea of watching yourself get out of yourself. When you're having an experience that's stressful, it's almost like you're having an out of body experience. You are in the moment, and yet you aren't your full self. And what I try to tell folks and myself is, if that's happening to you, you want to find a way to anchor yourself back into the current reality. And just like you said, the senses are amazing, easy to access tools to do that. For example, one thing I love to do is when I feel stuck in my body because something is stressful, I use my sight to look for an exit. And this is a very simple thing that works for me. Just
Mm.
looking at the door and remembering that, but there's a door out there. If it really got down to a level of stress that was extremely uncomfortable, I could just leave, right? That calms me down because it reminds me that this moment, which feels so overwhelming and stressful, if I step back into myself, I have agency. That's one. Two, I love the
Wait,
one you
can I just
mentioned,
comment on that,
touch.
Dido? I
That's,
find that so interesting
of course,
that because I've
of
never heard
course.
somebody use a door as really a symbol of safety, is what you're saying. Because what it
Hmm.
means to you is that I'm not trapped, right? And one of the things that
Yes.
is very hard about and can activate the stress response in the body is the feeling of being trapped and stuck. And if you think evolutionarily, that makes sense, right? Because if you were trapped or stuck somewhere, that means you would be the prey of some sort of predator, right? Trapping and cornering you. And so, what I love about what you said is just looking around. And by the way, a door is everywhere, right? It reminds you that, oh, wait, I'm not trapped. I'm not stuck. I can leave. I have agency over what I'm doing in this moment. If I get to a point when I'm too overwhelmed by what's happening, I have an exit plan. I love that. I think that's a really
Yep.
neat really neat thing. It's almost reminding me too of like other symbols that we have in society that represent things. Like I'm wearing my wedding band, and it's like this is a
Hmm.
symbol of connection to somebody else that I know is out there. So when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm stressed, when I feel lonely, I always have this symbol on here that there's somebody there that is my partner, even if they're not physically here. And so if we
There
can
you
look to
go.
more of these symbols for ourselves of reminders that we are safe, that we are loved, that we're okay here right now in this moment, that can be a real gift that we give ourselves. So thank you for that door idea. I love that.
Of course, thank you. And I think that's why this is such a fascinating topic for me, because we all have access to a version of this. The ring on the finger does that. I always have a picture of my wife right by my desk when I'm working. So no matter how stressful the actual meeting on Zoom or Teams or whatnot, just a quick
Mhm.
glance anchors me into, I'm not trapped into this situation in this meeting, because just a quick little look, oh, real life is bigger than this one situation, and I feel anchored again. It works miracles to me. So I really encourage everyone to try it, because the same way I use the door or looking at the picture, it's also, I like counting the sounds that I'm hearing. And
Mm,
it's amazing how we get used to the things that make noise around us, and they become white noise, and we don't think about them. But if you try to actually take just like a minute to try to count as many sounds as possible in any environment, it can be in your kitchen, it can be in the backyard, you will notice sounds that are there all the time that you never pay attention to. And just having that AC sound and counting, okay, that's the AC. Maybe that's a neighbor walking outside. Just doing that once again allows you to use your sense of just hearing, listening, to ground yourself back into the current reality. So that works for me, as well as the example you give about the sweater you're wearing, or holding something is a pen sometimes. Because again,
mhm,
holding that thing, the touch, ground you back into, I'm here, I'm not trapped. So
mhm,
I actually love that example around the sensory experiences. So thank you for bringing that
mhm.
up.
It also, I would love to add like a little bit even more of a kind of feminist angle on this as well, which is one of the things that I feel like society kind of gets wrong about women is that, oh, women care about design, looks of things, beauty, spend a lot of time curating a home, for example, and that might be seen as like frivolous or what, like that doesn't really matter. And in fact, I actually think through my understanding of the sensory system and stress science, that let's take the home, for example. Curating a comfortable living space is actually foundational to a family life, to even an individual's life, and their ability to recover from stressful times. And that's because when you curate a comfortable, welcoming, warm, beautiful home that you walk into, your body can actually go into a state where it realizes, okay, I can relax here. There's all these sensory cues that are signaling unconsciously to my body that I'm safe, I'm thought about, you can be comfortable, you can kind of put down the stress of the day and just be here and recover. And what could be more important than that, right? Than having a comfortable
Yeah.
space to welcome yourself back into, your family, your kids, your friends, your loved ones. So, if you can think about in a home environment, what are the sensory cues that you can cultivate that right when you walk in the door can give you that sensation of safety? Right? Sometimes it's decluttering, not having stuff everywhere. There's actually research on this showing that for women in particular, the amount of stuff that you can visually see is directly positively correlated with the amount of stress that you feel in your home. The other thing you can do is
Wow.
curate, like having peaceful music playing, lighting a candle, putting, making tea that has that really good aroma smell to it. really intentionally creating a space that feels safe. And if you think about kind of historically, this has really been a big priority in places of worship, like churches, for example. When you walk in, they're so beautiful. And they have often have
Mhm.
really soft lighting. And then they play
Yeah,
really beautiful music.
music.
And that has lasted for a long, long thousands of years, those fundamentals. And that's because our bodies respond to that. It's not all just up here in our heads, it's literally in our bodies and our cells. We feel that sense of safety from those positive sensory cues.
Wow. So that's a really beautiful summary of some of the things that we've been discussing, but also a transition into the next topic as we get ready to close out, right? You mentioned this before, and I want to kind of set the stage in this way. As human beings, in my experience, we love the idea that we think a lot. We love the idea that we figure things out in our brain, we solve problems. And it's kind of hilarious to see how easy it actually is to shift somebody's perspective. Um, like they've done all these surveys where they tell folks to perhaps say what they believe in terms of maybe some controversial issues politically, and they choose the answers for like 4 to 5 questions. Then they let you go, and then 2 weeks later, they show you the answers that you had and just lie to you that no, you actually see that you were for this thing and against this thing, and the same people that defend these positions that they were lied to about. So, if for example you recycle, and I told you that no, you said you don't recycle, that recycling is not a good thing for everyone. People would argue for what they were told they believed, even though it wasn't true. That was one thing I
Wow.
found fascinating. The other thing is, this has happened to everyone when you're thinking, look, I got to save some money, things are just not going too well right now, I can't spend. And then you see something you really like. And it's the same you that say that I'm not spending any extra money for the next 3 months. But yet it's the same you that finds a way to rationalize why in this particular moment I really have to spend. There's no right or wrong. I'm not judging anyone here. We all do it. The point I'm making is that the thinking brain is something that is interesting, not always reliable. And the feelings that we experience, though, are often underestimated. In fact, sometimes people are called emotional as a way to make them feel as if their perspective is lesser than because it's emotional. And yet, it is easily arguable that we are feeling beings first, emotional beings first, before we rationalize things. You ask me a question about something, and I have a feeling about it. After the feeling, quickly, I create a story in my head that makes me feel like maybe I had a thought first. But my experience suggests that the feelings actually often come first. And so it goes back to the point you made about the vagus nerve, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to, this is an alley oop to you to talk to us about your thoughts, your experience, your ideas, your beliefs around this concept of the thinking brain versus the feeling brain, or the thinking body versus the feeling body, the thinking human being versus the feeling human being. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, such a rich topic. And I think I was trained as a psychologist, and psychologists are focused mostly on thoughts and the way that we think about things and how our thoughts influence our behaviors. So it's really a pretty clear direction. We think something and then we behave. And psychologists are also really focused on just the individual, like how do I operate myself out in the world? And from my research and reading over the last few decades of being in this field of psychological science and stress science, I realized that there's kind of two fundamental flaws here in that way of thinking. And the first is that oftentimes we don't think something and then act. We feel something and then act. And as you just described, we also then try to rationalize how we're feeling in some way. And then often we try to blame somebody else or some other thing for why we're feeling a certain way. And what really the way to kind of merge these two concepts that were thinking beings, but we're also feeling beings, is really that we're both. And the best decisions, the best way to be in the world is to have uh, the ability to integrate both of those pieces of data, of information about what's happening in this moment for me. So, both using the brain and the thoughts, and then using the body. So, the best example can be if you are starting to think that you're really annoyed with somebody, like you're really triggered by somebody that sent an email about something, and you want to react and you want to send an email back saying how annoyed you were, or whatever your feelings are. Well, if you just take that moment to really check in and really, why am I triggered right now? Let me check in with my body, and you realize, oh, wait, I forgot to eat lunch. I
Mm,
probably am really hungry. And then you
mm,
go to your thinking mind and you think, you know, they probably have a point. I said I was going
mm,
to send them that document and I didn't. I can see from their perspective that they are annoyed with me. And then I was supposed to do that thing. So you're using both your thinking brain and your feeling brain to come up with the best response. And the best response in that situation would be to go eat, take a pause, and then respond thoughtfully to that person and pretty factually about, you're right, I didn't do XYZ and I'm sorry, and here's how I'm going to repair that. And so learning to be able to listen to both and to pause and integrate is really how we are all going to continue to be able to show up as our best selves for those around us.
mm. Thank you for that. So it's essentially understanding that we're perhaps a lot more or a little more complicated than is often assumed, and knowing that it's okay to use both, right? It is not that thinking only or feeling only. It is, those things are connected. Like when I think about health, like I think I used to have a T-shirt that said like mental health is health, and the point there for me was always to say, when people talk about the physical things they feel in their body or an injury, it's easier to understand that that's health. But then when it's mental, it always seems a little more nebulous. And what I'm always saying to folks is that that's all health. All of that is connected. So what you just kind of told us there, Alexandra, is that we want to use both. Yes, you're feeling something, and it's okay that you feel that thing. However, especially before taking action, perhaps check in and go to those simple things that we said in the beginning. Eat something. I'm telling you, for me, it's gotten to the point where I don't even need to check in necessarily. I just know that I should either move right now before I respond, eat something,
Mm-hmm.
or take a nap. And for those who are listening, I actually do this, and it's always helpful. Always helpful. I'm going to go take a short little nap, and then I come back to it. And even if I haven't changed my mind about how to respond, I'm still in a better place to respond. And even if I haven't changed my mind about being annoyed after eating, I am in a better place to respond. So you either realize that perhaps the person had a point and you should not have taken action to go against them, or you realize, no, I do have a couple of things to say, but the things you say after a nap, after eating, after movement, in my experience, tend to be things that will make you prouder of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I use those. So thank you for that analogy of using both and communicating with with the two parts to come up with the best answer for the issue at hand.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of leads me in. Could I mention the cellular work that we've done in our
Of
lab? Because
course,
that kind of, yeah, it
of
goes right
course.
along there. I think um, what you're mentioning about taking a nap really speaks to the ability of resting your body, taking a pause to rebuild the resources that you have in your body to then go on in your day. And really, there's a very kind of cellular level explanation for this. And I worked with Martin Picard, who is a scientist at Columbia University. And he really is one of the founders of a field called stress energetics. He's a microbiologist and studies cellular functioning, in particular, what happens to mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell, when the cell is experiencing stress hormones. When stress hormones are introduced to a cell, what happens? And what he found is that one of the most cellularly depleting, so energetically depleting things you can do to a cell is introduce stress hormones. And that's because stress hormones signal that our survival is in question. So the mitochondria that are basically like the battery of a cell use all of their energy to respond to stress, like our survival's at stake. Use all our energy.
Hmm.
If you've had a stressful day or stressful situation and you feel depleted or tired from it, it's because you literally are having the battery life zapped out of your cells.
Wow.
So what we presented in our work together with a couple other colleagues, including Alyssa Epple from UCSF, is this theory called deep rest. And in this theory, what we hypothesize is that when you allow your body to go into a restful state, whether that's through meditation, walking in nature, taking a nap, listening to peaceful music, you're literally allowing your cells to rebuild their energy stores so that
Wow.
then you go off into the day, rest of the day, with more energy. Too many of us are depleting our energy stores every day, getting to the bottom of the barrel. Then you're reactive, you're tired, you're annoyed. It's not our best selves because you've used up all the energy you have. And so when you can create these rituals throughout the day of giving yourself these calm moments so that you can restore your energy, that will mean that you have better energy and more resources the rest of the day.
Wow. I mean, I love these conversations, and I want to just say something that's so useful for me now talking to you, and hopefully to those who are listening as well. I'm pretty intuitive when it comes to figuring out what to do for myself and also share with others how to take care of themselves. And I'm not a scientist, I don't do research. And it is so validating to hear you talk about the science behind all these practices, right? It's like it feels really, really good. So whether you're somebody who is spiritual, intuitive, or kind of scientifically inclined, the answers are here. Doing those things work. If the research is what you want, you can find it. Alexander just explained to us how literally, like, you allow the cells to build their energy again. Like, this idea of a battery that is depleted and then recharged, like, it's literally happening inside. I mean, I have goosebumps just saying this out loud because it's the metaphors that we use for energy and being depleted and recharging, to hear that this is what's literally happening. um it's pretty cool. And so I want to just thank you. I could talk to you forever. I want to thank you for this journey, which started like with us talking about your little experiment, I think in seventh grade, wanting to
Yeah.
know if folks could feel the energy, and like conducting your own experiment, and even being nuanced enough to say it was not conclusive, it was 50-50. I don't really know. Taking that and walking us through your experience with something as easily accessible as our senses, and teaching people how they can use their senses today through sensory experiences to bring themselves back to reality, to distinguish, discern between that stress that is caused by a real dangerous threat versus a perceived threat, right? You've given us those sensory experiences. The folks who are listening can see that today they can start. And then you give a little shout out too, right? To, if you're a woman who notices that you like to organize and clean, embrace that. There's something scientific about you walking into the space that you organize, decluttered, and feeling a certain way. Those essential oils, the music, all of that works for a reason, right? Like the idea of going to a spa, like there's a reason why you feel more relaxed there. And then you also grounded us in the balance of reality, right? It is okay for you to look at yourself from last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, especially as a new mom, and realize that the things you used to be able to do, you can't do them anymore. That does not make you wrong, bad in any way. It's just you having a human experience. So give some grace to yourself and then figure out what's working for you now. And of the things that may work for you, anchor sleep, which I had never heard about, is something I'm going to dive into, because it's possible that with those 4 hours in the early morning, you can just take care of yourself and keep on doing what you need to do. And I want to close with what we just talked about, which is this idea that the brain is great. We think a lot, and that's useful. However, there's something about the feeling part of who we are that we need to at least elevate so it can meet the thinking part of who we are, because those two parts together make for a more powerful combo that will lead to you living the kind of life that you want to live. And I could not be more grateful to have talked to someone who understands those things I just discussed, but also has the research and the science background to tell people who, like me, are curious about the why behind things, why it feels good to take a nap. So now I feel good, because I'm telling you, I have taken naps minutes before keynotes, minutes before presentations, minutes before big speaking engagements. And it sounds nuts, but because I've practiced it, I just trust it. And those 5 minutes, even when I couldn't come up with an idea, I just know that when I come back, I will be okay. And it has never let me down. Now I have a better understanding of why, thanks to you. So I'm going to give you the last word, Alexandra. The people who are listening to us, what are your parting words for them after having listened to this conversation between us?
Yeah, Dido, thanks for that. Thanks for the nice summary. And I think the closing words are to experiment with yourself. Like, I love what you said, like you've tried it a bunch and it works for you. That is what it takes, is figuring out how can I show up each day with kindness to myself, towards others, and as the way I want to be in the world. And what are the practices that I need to do to make sure that I can do that sustainably? And that just takes work and individual experimentation.
That's beautiful. We're going to end with that. And also, those who are listening, remember, when in doubt, choose kindness, and start with kindness to yourself, because you deserve to receive that kindness as well. Thanks for listening.